revisit something from middle school dealing with equations and inequalities. And we are going to look specifically at these symbols and what they mean. So these should look familiar: greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. And we're going to talk about the keywords of how we know which one we're using, what it looks like on a number line, as well as interval notation. So a lot of this should be familiar. So the first one we're going to start with is greater than. So this symbol greater than, the key words to know if we are working with, obviously the first word, greater, more, larger, above, all of these meaning greater than. So that's how we would know we're using this symbol. So an easy example, x is greater than 4. You might also hear x is more than 4 or above 4. So any type of interpretation with this word, interchange with any of these, would be our greater than symbol. So what does that look like on a number line? So first of all, number line here, what we need to talk about is how do we know what symbols to use and which way to shade. So first of all, on a number line, there are two types of dots that you will have, a closed dot and an open dot. So we've got to decide which one we will be using. A closed dot means included, or it has the equal to part in the symbol. The open dot means not included, so no equal to. So in this sense, when we're saying greater than 4, that means we literally are using every number above 4, but it's not including 4. So if it's not including 4, we will use an open dot. So here's my number line. At the point 4, I'm going to draw an open dot to say, this is my marker. We're basing our graph off of 4, but 4 is actually not included. We want everything greater. Now, which way is greater? So one thing we have to remember is the way a number line looks. So if this is our number line, these are the greater numbers. These are the lesser numbers. So if we have a greater than symbol, it's going to go to the right, less than goes to the left. I like to think about it as alliteration as well. Less is to the left. Greater has all the R's, right? So greater is to the right. So if I want all the numbers greater, just remember this is the positive direction. All the greater numbers are to the right. So we would shade to the right. And so this is our graph representation of greater. So now an inequality. Inequality symbols really just use the actual symbol. So this is where we're making a statement with the symbol. One thing that you need to remember is that X always goes first when we're writing a statement. Oops, that's not how you spell first. First. So just like when we were solving equations, the X needs to be on the left-hand side. So if I'm going to write X is greater than 4, I need to have X first, the greater than symbol, and then 4. So what we want to remember is that this symbol will always open to the larger value. So if X is greater than 4, X is the larger value. So that's another way to remember. We're going to open to the larger value. Now, the last thing, the interval notation, this would be new for you guys. This is something you haven't seen. So this is where we really want to pay attention today. When we are writing interval notation, first, what we want to remember is we are writing from left to right, and that'll make sense in a second. So let's get that down. We are writing left to right. When we're dealing with open dots, we are going to use parentheses. So open or not included. When we are using a closed dot, that means included, we use brackets. Okay. Then we use numbers like infinity and negative infinity for our arrows. Those represent kind of our arrows. All right, so what does all of this mean? The easiest way to do this is going back to your number line and reading it left to right. So we're talking about the shaded region when we're reading it. So my first question is, where is my shaded region starting? Okay, well, my shaded region starts at 4. That's the leftmost point. and it's going to the right. Now the right has an arrow, which means it's never ending. So it's going to some sort of infinity. And when we're going to the right, we are going to positive infinity. So I'm going to say that my interval, the shaded region, starts at 4 and goes to infinity. That's what this means. Now, what we use for our casings is what I like to call them, is whether it's open or closed for our dot. So our dot for 4 is open. That's what the parentheses means. This is another way of saying open. And then the parentheses will always be with infinity. So that's something you can note in here as well. Your infinities will always use parentheses. So this is just another way of saying our graph is from 4 to infinity, and then this means that it is open. Okay, so that was a lot for number 1. It'll go quicker since we're not explaining as much in detail up here. So less than. So the words that go with less than are less, smaller, below. Less, smaller, below. So again, this is just a verbal example. X is less than 4. So when we're putting this on the number line, the first thing we want to decide, open or closed. So it's going to be an open dot since it's less than. It's not including 4. We're talking about all the numbers less than 4. Now, less is to the left. So to the left is where we will shade. And as you remember, on a number line, and you can just count it down, 3, 2, 1. Those are the lesser values. So that is my graph. Open at 4 to the left because we're going less. X is always written first for an inequality. So X and then less than 4. So if X is the smaller value, remember your sign should open to the larger value. And then our interval. So remember, we are reading left to right on our graph. So if I go to my graph, the shaded region is right here, and the left-hand side is an arrow, right? An arrow means infinity. But if we are on the left-hand side, this starts going into our negative numbers, right? Negative goes this way. So if I'm going on for forever on this side, I'm going to negative infinity. So my graph is actually starting at negative infinity, which sounds kind of weird, but we're starting at negative infinity on the left, and we're shading all the way up to the number 4. So to the number 4. Infinities always use parentheses. 4 is open. Because we're not using it, it's not included, so we use a parentheses. All right, greater than. Greater than or equal to. So when we have the equal to, this part right here changes up our wording a lot. So when we're using the phrasing greater than or equal to, another way it can be stated is a minimum, at least, no less than, no smaller than. Now that sounds kind of weird because this phrasing is literally greater or equal to, right? Greater, but I have all these small sounding words. So we got to think about what that means. At least, no less than, no smaller than. What that means is that you have a minimum value that you are using. So in this example, X is greater than or equal to 4. That means X is no less than 4. It's not less, right? It's not smaller. It's at least 4. So if it's at least 4, that means it could be 4, but it also could be anything above 4. So this is where people can kind of get confused if you start reading things quickly and you just see a less than type word. A lot of times people might think it's a less than symbol, but we have to read what it means. It's not less than 4. It's no less. So that means it could be 4, but it also could be greater than 4. So then our symbol, if X is no less than 4, that means it could be bigger than 4, right? So it's the bigger value, or equal to 4. All right, and then the last thing is our interval. So again, remember, intervals are read left to right. So looking at our graph, that's what we always want to go back to is the graph. On the left-hand side is the number 4. So that's what I'm going to start with. And we are going all the way to the right. And remember, arrows mean infinity. So I'm going to the right, and that is a positive infinity we're going to. Now here's where it's different. It is a closed dot, which means we can actually use 4. 4 is allowed or part of our answer. And when we have a closed dot, we have a different bracket that we'll use. Just like we have different dots to show this, we have a different casing. So if something is closed or included, we will use a bracket to say the 4 is part of the answer. It's included. And then our infinities will always use parentheses. This one looks a little bit different. It's not a full bracket. It's 4 is included, but infinity, remember, that always has a parentheses. And that just takes some practice getting used to and memorizing those symbols. All right, last one we'll talk about on here is the less than or equal to. So less than or equal to, if you want to write that in, less or equal. Phrasings, maximum, at most, no greater than, no more than, and no bigger than. So again, this phrasing kind of sounds opposite because it's a less than symbol, but we're saying it's a max, no greater, no more. So if x is no greater than the number 4, that means it could be 4, which is where we get the closed dot for. It could be the number 4, but it can't be greater. So that means if it can't be greater, it has to be everything less than or equal to the number 4. So writing our inequality, x always goes first, and x is less than or equal to 4. So that means it's either below 4, right? So less than, 4 is bigger, or it could equal the 4. All right, and last thing, interval notation, reading left to right. On the left-hand side, we have parentheses with a negative infinity. So remember, negative infinity is on the left. Pencil that in if you need it. And infinities always have parentheses. So that's what's on the left, and it goes all the way up to 4. That's where we stop our shading, and that 4 is closed, which means it's included. It's part of the answer. So we have this bracket of 4. Okay, so we are going to stop there. This is going to be for tomorrow because these are a little bit more complicated, so we're going to talk about this in person. So that's it for today. No extra problems on your own, just getting this done, and we will finish the graphic tomorrow in class.